Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Gran Turismo, starring David Harbour, Orlando Bloom, Archie Metawick, I don't know if I said that name right, please forgive me, Takiro Hira, Darren Barnett, Jerry Horner, and Jimon Hounsou, directed by Neil Blomkamp. Welcome back to the show, Neil Blomkamp. After I reviewed Demonic as well as his three other films, District 9, Elysium, and Chappie, as well as Demonic, now I'm on to his fifth film that's based on a true story based on a video game from PlayStation that I had one of the games once. So, and the fact that they said that this was a true story, I thought, give me a break. Although the guy is real, from what I'm understanding. The main character that's supposed to be portrayed in this movie is pretty real. Let's get into it, and you'll see what I mean. The movie is based on a true story starting in 2011. Video games all over the world playing one game on the PlayStation called Gran Turismo in Cardiff in the UK. We start with Jan Mardenborough, forgive me if I said that wrong, played by Archie Matawick, forgive me if I said that wrong, started playing the Gran Turismo games, and his father Steve, played by Jimon Hounsou, telling him he can learn from his little brother Kobe instead of playing the video games, which was an interesting opening as it grabbed me for a good time with the protagonist who happens to be Jan. In Tokyo, Japan, we get introduced to Danny Moore, played by Orlando Bloom, introducing a new type of racing based on a video game called What Else? Gran Turismo, and shows a foreign audience, which happens to be the Japanese, and one man named Akiba, I don't know if I said that name right, please forgive me, accepting under one condition, and that is there happens to be a coach to train the new recruits, as he called everyone except for his last resort, Jack Salter, excuse me, played by David Harbour, whom, despite I like the other characters, but in my opinion, is the best character in the whole movie, as he tells Danny it's impossible after learning from a video game, and director Neil Blomkamp does a pretty good job at the cinematography for this movie. Jan has dinner with Kobe, Steve, and his mother Leslie, played by one of the Spice Girls herself, Jerry Horner, as Jan loses his appetite while Jack has dinner with Nicholas Kappa, as well as his father Patrice, and Nicholas acts like an ass to Jack when he says he'll talk to his team partner, and he calls him as a has been. And I do like the beginning this far, as Jan gets accepted to play Gran Turismo to enter a racing contest with a message by Danny. And if he thinks he's the best driver in the Gran Turismo racing business, he's inspired to follow his dreams. But Kobe talks Jan into going to the pier for a party and convinced him when his crush Audrey will be there, and goes and talks with Audrey about where they would as she would go to, and she says she would go to New York for the pizza, and Young wants to go to Japan for racing reasons until the cops come by, and they escape as Jan is driving and Kobe is drunk, and he asks for a beer for the car from the car next to them, I'll say. And the cops witness, they hand over the beer to Kobe, and Jan drives away like a frickin' maniac and trying to lose the cops until he comes home and sees Steve, and he makes him work with him at the rail yard. And after one day, Jan quits the job to become a race car driver and wins first place at the Gran Turismo competition. Am I the only one who had a very hard time understanding what the hell these characters were saying? Because their accents, because of their accents, as that was kind of bothering me for about half the movie. But I like the movie as it is going to work good. Steve says it's not a career, as John decides to go to the Gran Turismo Academy, and when he arrives there, Jax makes a speech saying he can't do it as well as every other candidate, and the dialogue was written pretty good, as they learn it's not a video game, it's real life. As they learn to drive and sometimes play it on the games, and they're training intensely, and Jan is not press ready from what I'm getting from the scenes in the movie. And I like their other racing characters like Maddie Davis, Leah Vega, and others. And as Jack rides with Jan, and Jack is led to believe he's not committed, while Jan says the brakes were glazed. And later in the day, a mechanic says the brakes were glazed. And I'm no expert in car driving, nor am I an expert in cars, but Jan makes it to the top 5 racers by the next day as he listens to jazz music, which was pretty amusing. And I like the training montage scenes as they work well. Jan racing against the other 4 racers, and I did like the point of view of Jan. And we see what place he's in versus how many laps he has left, and he wins against Maddie Davis by an inch, which did get me on the edge of my seat during that scene. And the race scenes are very intense, as I was on the edge of my seat for about half of them. Danny and Jack says he's got to get 4th place against the other racers and warns him about everyone going to hate on him as they get to Vienna, Austria, to prepare for the race as we have to Red Bull Ring. And Jan feels nervous as he plays Stay Awake, Stay Awake, Stay Awake, which is a good song to relax to. And Austria looks beautiful thanks to the cinematography. Jan's first race is when the Screen X shows during the race scenes, as it is very intense to watch, as he at the end of it places 27th, no thanks to a gold car who happens to be Nicholas, placing 4th place, but they're lucky still have a chance to place 4th place in the next races, as he places 23rd place to 17th place and 8th place, and eventually wins 4th place and gets his license in Dubai during his last chance. And Nicholas loses his win spot against Jan because he crashed, and Jan does what in 4th place and gets his license, and Jan and Jack celebrate by having a beer, and Jack suggests he asks Audrey to his next race, and he calls her from his hotel room, and they go to Tokyo like when he always wanted to go to, and signs a contract to drive for Nissan. And Danny suggests for Jan and Audrey to run and explore the city of Tokyo and have some sushi and go to a club. And I really like these scenes as they act well together, and their chemistry is pretty good. We get to Germany, and Jan listens to jazz music again and gives Jack a gift of appreciation, as we'll see what it is later in the film, while Steve and Leslie watch him race on the TV, and he's on the 6th lap, in 5th place, and moves up to 2nd place until he flips the car over and gets himself into an accident, which was very, very intense scene. As Jack and Danny run to him, and Jan gets into the paramedic and goes to the hospital, and oh my god, I held the edge of my seat so hard when he flipped over like that. That's how afraid I was for Jan, as that's how much I care for him as a character. Jan wakes up and sees Jack and Danny, and Jack says it's not Jan's fault, it's his own fault, and he screams, and Jan screams, "Get out," as he's worried for his life, and Steve tries to call Jan, but he doesn't pick up the phone, and he calls Audrey about it as he feels guilty. And I felt so bad for Steve and Leslie, and Jan is afraid to show them himself, which is very sad. I felt bad for the poor guy. Jack opens the gift that happens to be a music player, and he takes Jan to the racetrack and confesses why he quit racing in the first place, as he was in a wreck, and he didn't scratch himself, but someone in a Ford died. And he never had to be a driver of a seat. He never had to be on the driver's seat of a race car ever again. And he quit racing and suggests Jan to not make the same mistake Jack made years ago. And Jan wants to finish the race by driving the rest of the track. What's left of it, I'll say. And I do like the montage, as it was a good way to show he's ready for the next race, while Jan doesn't give up racing. And Danny and Jack believe in him, and Jan says he's ready to as well, and brings his friends to help out racing with Jan. And Lehman's, I don't know if that's the real name, but no, it's a country which happens to be in city, which happens to be in France for a 24-hour shift. And Steve, Kobe, and Leslie show up for the race, as well as Audrey, as well as his friends from the academy. And Steve comes to Jan's trailer and says to be careful out there in the race, as he did the racing all by himself, and how proud he is of Jan. And they stand up for the French national anthem as the race begins, with a couple of crashes, but neither one was Dion while a third car crashed, catching on fire, and the driver made it out alive. Jan is in 5th place for now, until a couple of cars pass him, and Jack and gets Jan distracted by relaxation music, and he turns off the radio, and Jan gets mad to the point he passes everyone a few places, and he goes in the pits at times, and he gets ninth place as it starts to rain, and surprisingly he can see driving in the rain, which I can't, which is amazing to me because I couldn't for the life of me. And he finishes the first half in 8th place, and they get further up to 4th thus far before Jan gets back out there to the race, and Jack helps him out, and not to drive but to put a part back together. And Jan catches up as he says he's played the track like 1,000 times and lets him drive in his own way. And he gets further up to eventually 1st place, and he wins the race, and they celebrate with champagne, that's what it is. And the movie ends with his relaxation song, which is Stay Awake, Stay Awake, Stay Awake. And it was a nice way to end the movie, as the climax was inspiring at the end of the day. Now it's time for my rating. I'll give this movie a 7.1 out of 10. I do like the characters, but David Harbour is the best character in the whole movie, in my opinion. And director Neil Blomkamp does a good job with the cinematography, as this movie looks pretty damn good. The race scenes are pretty intense, and as I was on the edge of my seat for the entire race scenes, and the running in this is pretty damn good as for a biography about race car drivers. And I honestly thought, like Blue Beetle, that this movie was going to be garbage, but another turnaround, as it was better than I was expecting. And I would watch it again on streaming at some point. I wouldn't own the physical copy but at the end of the day, this is a recommendation and I think people should really check this out, and if they're into car races. So I'd like to thank you guys for returning to Neil Blomkamp, and until he comes out with another movie, stay awake, stay awake, stay awake.